IDW Sonic, issue 59. The first page is wasted for no reason because we see flying badniks, we see close-ups of Shadow, Rouge, Sonic, and Tails, and then we see them meet. Rouge says, "Hey there kids," as if she's an adult. Even if she was only 18, this wouldn't make sense in universe. As 06 voice sounding too mature is the only reason it'd be seen as making sense that she says this when Sonic's not a kid. Sonic says he's flattered that they came to rescue him. He just assumes that was the case because he's got an ego. Because Shadow's team would have no reason to know he was heading here. They're not friends with Jewel, so they wouldn't constantly check on her. Shadow doesn't know what he means, and Rouge apologizes and puts her hand on Sonic's shoulder and says that as I expected, she called her boys in to deal with Eggman City put together, even though it's been around for quite some time. So why is she talking like she just found out about it? Just because it got a little bigger. What took them so long to find the city? Amy just has to glare at Rouge judgmentally when saying that she's doing something compassionate. Why? First off, it's not just altruistic because it ruined Eggman's day. Right now, Eggman City being big is not doing anything to inconvenience anyone. So smashing his robot seems pointless right now. And second, I really didn't miss her mistreatment of Rouge earlier. Sure, she's lampshading that she's acting as a freedom fighter for no selfish reason, but you'd think it'd be easy for her to assume that anybody would love smashing Eggman's stuff. Why is the artist drawing her to look like this where she's at eye level with her chest, and somehow nobody finds this awkward? Rouge just has to explain that she's here to steal from Eggman's private vaults. Private is redundant there. Tails suggests teaming up with Rouge. Omega lampshades that this conversation is relevant to their mission, and Rouge at least says there's no hard feelings and says they'd only slow them down. Which is a good point, as it's already happened. So far, the only thing Team Dark's contributed to the actual plot is wasting tons of comic space on the characters boringly talking and doing nothing, making a mistake to include them, as I'm sure the heroes could have beaten those robots too. Sonic looks disappointed, but considering how powerful Shadow is, there's no harm in there being separate teams going through Eggman City so that Eggman can't take them all out at once. Team Dark was just fighting badniks so the other heroes won't have to. It's not like Shadow is facing a really dangerous giant robot, making me wonder why he doesn't warp it in half for Sonic. The appearance of Shadow has been harmless, other than him irritatingly disrespecting Sonic, of course. As if we didn't get enough valuable comic space wasted, an announcement of Eggman's brags to Sonic, giving us information on the city that we already knew from last issue. How did he take so long to find out Sonic was here? He says that for every leveled building, a dozen more will show up. I guess getting the extra material from underground. Why should I care? He was always gonna have a Robotropolis anyways, so I never had any hope otherwise. Then he tries to stick Shadow androids on them, so there's no originality there, but they are threatening, being fast, and reminds me of what they did to Whisper's friends. I'm gonna assume they don't have Chaos Control, because that'd be too hard to replicate, because otherwise it'd ruin the writing that they somehow don't win instantly with it. Why did he wait so long to stick these robots on the heroes when robots this fast are so overpowered that you'd think they'd instantly kill most of the characters with their speed? I like seeing this concept get used against Sonic in a comic for the first time aesthetically, but then I worry about that plot hole. Metal Sonic's overpowered enough. Maybe it's a good thing that usually he's the only super fast robot he has. After all, why didn't he defeat all the heroes a long time ago just by sticking Shadow androids after them? Most of them aren't nearly fast enough to survive that. And while he could say the fast characters would protect the slow ones, he could just send the Shadow androids after them when they're all asleep, so no protection. Orbot wastes time sucking up to Eggman for no reason, and then says he knew that holding on to the Shadow androids would pay off someday, which is a silly line because he would have remembered using them against Whisper's old team. I guess it means holding on to them after they destroyed Whisper's team, never mind. The comic's so obsessed with referencing the games, I thought he was referring to Shadow the Hedgehog. You'd think he would still be actively using it since Whisper's team. Then he humanizes himself a little by asking for the shaky cheese for the popcorn. but I'd rather see it, because I've never read about this in the series before. Somehow, Lanolin tells Tangle to get down because she somehow forgot they're intangible and invisible to everyone in this dimension. Because there's no limit to how stupid the characters in this comic can actually be, and I'm always surprised by it. Lanolin's supposed to be a smart, amazing leader, so it's annoying to see even Discount Sally be not smart enough. Whisper unhappily talks about how the shadow androids are what happened to her old team, and sits down scared that it's gonna repeat itself. The background's all dark, which is a good way to create the atmosphere at least, even if it's always unacceptably lazy to have an anime background. Tangle reassures her with her hand on her shoulder, as I wish the shadow androids weren't used in the story, because it's just wasting more comic space on us as a result, since I already knew she was afraid of them. He could have easily not used them because they were ignored before, and most of this issue has just been characters talking with nothing happening. Issue 152 of Archie had the same problem, not to mention the same nanite expanding city. And bad art was the only reason it was outright horrible compared to these two issues. Sonic asks Tails what they're looking at here, and Tails says he doesn't know and says they're robots for sure, but they're so fast that he can't get a clear reading. They don't remember these from Shadow the Hedgehog? I hope this makes sense because shadow androids were never in a level in Shadow the Hedgehog that Sonic and Tails were also in. Even then, you'd think anyone who saw these would have spread the word, and they'd already know they existed regardless. Why didn't Silver telekinetically tear apart all of the robots around them? I knew it'd be a huge mistake to put him in this arc for no reason. I know in 06 he can't hold things and hover, but he has no reason to hover because tearing them apart from the ground or smacking some of them into the others would only take a second of being vulnerable on the ground. And all of these robots are just standing there menacingly, reminding me of Zombots when they could all run at the heroes and instantly kill them. Some fire gets thrown at the robots, but they're perfectly fine afterwards, and the writer makes a mistake of having a character say that should have stopped them. If the robot was made to be fireproof, well, okay, but that should have been said instead, because this is a fantasy universe. So on the one hand, robots could be made to be supernaturally fireproof. Especially since there's fake emeralds in the city, even if he didn't use an emerald for this. But on the other hand, Blaze has magic fire. She could have the fire be as hot as she wants. You'd think it'd have obliterated them anyways, but they're just that fireproof. It's confusing at first because since when are the shadow androids ever fireproof? Gee, Eggman really improved on them. I guess this is believable instead of forced drama then. Maybe they should have had new concepts instead of robots from the games then. It feels unfair to the heroes and a surprise, but it's good for there to be some surprises, because you don't want to be just predictable. I thought there'd be no surprises in this issue, and I'd have already known everything that would happen in it from last time. Sonic tells Silver to give him a ramp, and Silver moves the ground below them up to tilt it. That looked awesome, but Silver destroying all of the shadow androids with psychokinesis would have been even more awesome. He's not so dumb that he wouldn't remember he can kill robots. None of the characters would be so dumb that they would forget that about Silver. It's bad enough there's been over 396 idiot balls in this comic so far. Amy has to hold on to Sonic for dear life, and he wisely decides to retreat, jumping away while Blaze holds on to Tails. Shadow ends up faced with the Shadow Android. Now Yusuke has control, Shadow. Warp all of them away, or at least freeze time for 30 seconds. Oh no, he just stands there for some reason, when it could at least be homie attacking. Him not having the 50 rings to Yusuke has control would be a believable excuse for being forgotten every time. I really wish it was explained every time instead of making Shadow enragingly stupid when you ask the right question. Besides, I'm not even sure if he does canonically need 30 rings for that, or if it's just a gameplay thing, so that's the problem. Shadow calls the robots out on having no strategy, the hypocrites. Couldn't he create Tornado too? And says that once the teams move to a better position, they can take them out. As Omega helps them by shooting some of them, and not telling Sonic to create a tornado. There's a few unsatisfying unclear looking panels with sound effects where who knows what's happening. Sonic asks Shadow if these robots are his cousins, but he's smiling, so he's just joking, of course. And it's kind of amusing that he felt like making this joke in a tense scene. And he clearly looks serious for the most part, and was intimidated enough to try to retreat, so it's not like he doesn't take them seriously. He's just trying to feel better. One of the robots gets kicked, and Omega says his stabilizers are failing and is in trouble. Somehow Shadow expects me to believe that he doesn't have the energy to perform chaos control without an emerald, when he did that after he first met Eggman.
Behold the true power I possess.
And did he even have an emerald when he warped so much in his racing fight with Sonic? I definitely don't remember it being in his hand in the cutscene before it, and there's no room in his shoes and gloves for one. But oh, that's gameplay and story segregation, but you've seen it in the cutscene too! This writer's no better than Izuka, who has the same misconception about his own series. And that's not even mentioning Sonic X. But to be fair, it was never mandatory for any of the game's plots that Shadow could use chaos control without an emerald. I'm not angry because this isn't a massive continuity error retcon making the comics past confusing. This is not the game's continuity. It can't be after a full statement like this. And I welcome anything that could make this unique from the games. But I bet the writer didn't mean to make it unique and just forgot SA2 despite being a Sonic fan. Wait. He used chaos control to get closer to Mr. Tinker. If he didn't have an emerald in his hand to there, this line is Shadow being wrong, even in IDW. He somehow forgot about this detail himself. And this isn't just minor, because if he didn't forget this moment, he would have used chaos control to get rid of all the Shadow androids instantly. I mean, didn't the Bio-Lizard have the newspaper article on him mention an organ for chaos control? Why on earth would the prototype have one and not Shadow? Never mind, I guess the organ was too big to fit in Shadow, and Gerald didn't have a shrink ray. Tails says there's fake emeralds generating chaos energy he could use, but Shadow says the energy is distorted, which makes sense as they're only fake emeralds. Though I thought the thing was the fake emeralds are less powerful, not having distorted energy. But apparently, the energy being distorted is why they're less powerful. He uses chaos control anyways, which makes sense after Sonic used the fake emerald in SA2 successfully. And he better have destroyed all the robots then. So if he did that anyways, him forgetting did nothing but waste time. Shadow says chaos, but trails off when he sees big fake emeralds in front of him as Amy and Rouge are in the air, and he confusingly says it's too much. And more yellow emeralds start appearing, causing Rouge to tell Amy to run, as Amy's being carried by Tails. Eggman gets annoyed at seeing a screen saying that an emergency limiter was activated, as Tangle's team continues doing nothing but wasting my time. That scene wasn't worth it. Couldn't he just never run out of stuff to get from underground, when he could just constantly get more materials from around that abyss, or below it? The hero stared down from a rooftop, and Tails says it was from a runaway feedback loop. I still don't get it. Why did more fake emeralds show up? Wouldn't making even one be hard? I doubt you could just make it from any old city materials. I get what looks like city material being created to replace what's destroyed, but not fake emeralds, which I guess would be made out of glass. Sonic says he looks forward to rescuing Shadow. He needed rescuing? What happened? Was that what a blast of energy and a beam was? That felt arbitrary. Besides, he survived the unsurvivable, and he's super powerful, so I don't see why they think he needs saving. Eggman says power was restored, but he can't get any badniks to see the heroes, who he calls animals. A throwback to Archie when humans were discriminatory to Mobians. So that's realistic. Lanolin says this place would be history if a worse power surge was caused. How can intangible people cause one? Then Lanolin seems to freak out for no reason at all, and then Eggman sees her team at last because the effect was only temporary. Just as I wondered how it was ever going to be undone. The writer had no idea how to undo it. I looked forward to what creative solution the writer would come up with, and got this convenient cop-out. Eggman says that they ran into his spatial displacement trap. So now he's gonna waste tons of time talking and doing nothing, when a real menacing villain would just punch them. He really bores me saying that they almost got out when the power dipped, and then threatens them with some vague tech. Whisper aims at him, and the laser goes right through him without him getting hurt because she can't bother him because his trap separated her and her Wispawn from normal space. Oh, but he can still hear and see them, so it's only partially worn off. Are people really mad at Whisper for trying to kill Eggman twice? Weren't people really mad at how edgy it was that Shadow tried to kill Eggman twice? It'd be hypocritical not to be mad at Whisper then. I don't know what's going on until Tangle's surrounded by some stuff that looks harmless. It doesn't look like it's completely surrounding her. It would have been more clear if we saw a force field around everyone that was being threatened by those floating things. The overly vague looking floating little things don't look dangerous, but they make Whisper scream. Maybe I'd take them more seriously if Eggman said what they were going to do to them first. Since the comic wouldn't kill Whisper off, she must have been warped to a pocket dimension. Lanolin pushes Tangle to safety. Lanolin says to Tangle to find the others to tell them what to do. Like, none of them could figure that out on their own, even though Tails is with them. Then a text bubble from Lanolin comes out of the gray thing sent after them, indicating that she was captured by it. It's surprising that they ran into any trouble in the state they were in. And I guess it wasn't forced. Too bad all Lanolin did that was useful in the city was get herself kidnapped instead of someone with a special ability. As if to say that major characters without those that can only come up with plans are only good for this. She'll need to do better than this to be a good Sally. But at least her design's great, so I take her as a replacement Sally over Nothing, or Amy, or Jewel. Then she sees she's still intangible to something and jumps down. I guess nobody else was fast enough to do that. And the issue has the nerve to end there. Too much comic space got wasted. I wish it was all plot progression because barely anything happened. I just want the heroes to be done in the city, which they could have easily been by the end. It looks like she's falling from a lethal height, so either something will save her, like her tail, or I'll have to assume she fell through invisible rings to keep her fall damage from being outright lethal when it should be. You'd think if Tangle could survive this fall just fine, so would someone else before this. This issue by Evan Stanley once again had barely any plot progression in Eggman City somehow, and it's what little counts as plot can be summarized just by saying there were shadow androids. Them being a surprise I didn't expect from the previous issue is the main appeal of this issue. But most of it is boring. The shadow androids somehow do almost nothing, standing still because the writer wrote herself into a corner by having fast robots that could kill all the heroes in seconds. Because most aren't fast enough to defend themselves against them. Because only Sonic was meant to fight Metal Sonic. And there's barely any fast characters to protect the slow ones, so that's not an excuse. So their designs and associations with the deaths of Whisper's friends are the only reason they still cause a ton of genuine tension. But remove that, they're the least competent robots ever. We barely saw them attack. It was a mistake to use them instead of new robots because Whisper wasted comic space from it, and I'm wondering why they're fireproof and aren't acting like the versions of them that killed Whisper's friends. As if they're acting like this here, they would have been fine. Shadow does eventually use Chaos Control, even if he has a dumb retconning excuse for taking so long, so it's got the same problem I anticipated, where the dramatic scene was forced to last so long because he's there. But him using it was actually necessary for the story, because the androids were so dangerous in theory that he needed to be there to do this to save everyone. So that's almost the best I could have hoped for to justify the fact that Sonic reading Rouge wasted tons of comic space. So the issue was better than I expected, actually remembering Chaos Control. But the main problem is 99% of the issue is boring dialogue where nothing happens. Only IDW could have more than a few issues in a row where the heroes are still in Eggman City, as if they think we don't want variety in settings. It's like they think every story arc has to last the same amount of time, and so they have to have the issues after this take place in Eggman City too, for no reason. Characters do so little that I just remembered Eggman noticed Tangle's team in the end, and she had to jump through the tower wall to save herself, because it got lost in a sea of they did nothing. At least that was another surprise, that her friends were captured and she went solo. Because naturally no one would expect from the previous issue that the effect would partially wear off on its own.